So thanks for joining this session or this conversation about conversation. Language and interactions are important code words in our field, but if we think about it, it's the conversation that makes language interactive. Before we really get started, I'd like you to stop the video here and go into the first assignment, reflection number 1. You are asked to reflect and think about the most meaningful conversation that you have had this past week. It may require some thought, but that's part of the plan. Come back to resume the video when you have finished this first assignment. What I hope you discovered about the previous assignment is that the reason you recalled the conversation that you did is likely because it was indeed memorable. That is the important part. One other thing to remember is that we need conversation. We begin mastering language at a very early age because of conversation. The need to communicate with others, the urge to cement bonds of affection leads to language mastery. That social need, as well as children's innate intellectual curiosity about the world, is exactly what takes children down the path to literacy. As you work through the session today, these are the projected outcomes for learning. It is hoped that participants will be able to implement the elements of high-quality interactions and conversation with children. We're going to consider what those elements are in just a moment. Participants will be able to explain the value of conversation as a strategy to meet multiple educational goals in the classroom. The fantastic thing about conversation is that it is integrated throughout the curriculum. Participants will be able to implement strategies for capturing teachable moments with conversation. Even though conversation can be intentional, it is those serendipitous moments that we should grasp whenever possible. Participants will be able to identify new ways to address educational goals and standards by integrating them via conversation throughout the classroom and throughout the day. These are those intentional teaching moments where you purposefully use conversation. This is one of those times where I'd like you to stop the video and find the next assignment. It is titled Elements of a Conversation, and that's one of the questions that I'd like you to answer. What are the elements of a conversation? So think a conversation is, and then what would be your answer? What makes a conversation different from just a couple of people giving individual speeches? And what makes a conversation effective or even great? Do the assignment and then return to continue this video. So that assignment gave you a chance to think about the components of a conversation. You likely came up with some version of many of the following elements. A conversation is the exchange of information between two or more people. A conversation requires turn taking. There should be at least 5 turns taken before we can really call it a conversation. Asking a question and getting a one-word answer shouldn't be considered a conversation. A conversation can be spontaneous, but can also be intentional. It's dynamic. That means it can change direction. It's usually going to be meaningful or of interest to all participants. And there's a sequencing of open-ended questions, answers, and comments. A good conversation is going to be responsive, allowing for corrections. And what makes a conversation effective or even great? a rich vocabulary. We learn so much from a great conversation. There's an integration of different types of information. If your conversation is with an English language learner, that conversation becomes even richer when we work to support the home language, using words and phrases in the home language. The use of nonverbal enhancements, a nod of the head, a well-placed smile. Enthusiasm. It's hard to converse with a boring person. One engaging, whimsical chat with a young child is enough to put a smile on the face at the end of the toughest day. For many of us, those magical interactions are what lured us into the field of early childhood education in the first place. Too often, the demands of day-to-day work in preschool classrooms makes those special moments seem like rare luxuries. Early childhood professionals can feel bombarded by a constant stream of new trends. Each trend comes with its own set of recommendations and requirements. Teachers and directors are overwhelmed with the complicated task of trying to provide quality programs with every one of these trends in place. It's time to take a step back and put this whole jumble into perspective. How can we make it all work? The answer can be found in one simple, entirely natural, completely free activity that we all enjoy: conversation, the most basic, most elegant form of human connection. It truly is the tie that binds us to each other. Let's take a look at some of today's trends and consider how conversation can be the unifying factor that links all of those new trends in early childhood education. Brain development. With the explosion of brain research, we learned that optimal brain development depends on warm, nurturing interactions with caregivers in the first few years of life. Then we began seeing national studies on early literacy that created a mandate for a preschool environment that supports the development of oral language and pre-literacy skills to get children ready to succeed in school. Social and emotional development. Experts began to worry that the increased spotlight on brain development and early literacy was pushing aside the focus on social and emotional development in early childhood education. Across the country, programs were promoted to give teachers strategies for developing children's social, emotional skills and for handling challenging behaviors. Inclusion. So in addition, a national effort is underway to support more fully integrated therapies within regular, inclusive preschool classrooms to meet the mandate of the least restrictive environment. Now, teachers, assistants, and specialists must all learn to interact with each child in the context of the regular classroom and adapt their curriculum accordingly. Child and classroom assessments. With so many areas being scrutinized, it makes sense that we started taking a closer look at the value of appropriate child assessments and classroom observations. Performance-based assessments of preschool children depend on the teacher's ability to engage children appropriately and listen objectively. Classroom assessments such as the ECHRS-R, the Early Childhood Environment Rating Scale, revised, also place a strong emphasis on the quality of adult-child interactions as markers of quality. The global economy. As if all of these responsibilities are not enough, every few months we are confronted with yet another ranking that shows the United States is lagging behind other countries in terms of student achievement in math and science. Preschool teachers are beginning to feel the responsibility for preparing their students to help our country succeed in the global economy. Success in that global economy depends on our ability to communicate. English language learners. Throughout the country, teachers are telling us that they see more children entering preschool with little or no English and from increasingly diverse language backgrounds. In every aspect of early learning, the teacher's effectiveness is dependent upon the ability of each child in her classroom to understand her words. So I'd like you to stop here and do the assignment that's titled 7 Trends. This assignment has you stop to think about the 7 trends that we just mentioned. As early educators, these trends are indicative of the expectations that society has of us. The effectiveness that we have in the classroom regarding these trends depends greatly on our comfort level and our confidence in meeting these trends. The assignment asks you to rate your level of confidence or your stress for each of the 7 trends that were mentioned. When you've finished, please return to this video. I hope that you've learned a bit about yourself as you did the last assignment. I hope that as this session continues and as you complete the assignments that are coming up, you'll become less stressed and more confident in these areas. States, school districts, organizations, and individual programs are all struggling with the challenge of how to bring all of these trends together in a way that is manageable for teachers yet effective for children. In searching for complex curricular solutions, teachers may be missing the simplest yet most useful answer. I have observed some wonderful teachers who know how to integrate all of these aspects of learning throughout the day in almost any situation. The richness and spontaneity of everyday conversations in the classroom and in the surrounding environment make it possible for a teacher to address each mandate. We need to let go of the focus on isolated learning. With conversation, we can help resolve a conflict while expanding early literacy, fostering understanding of number concepts, and getting an on-the-spot assessment of a child's learning. Let's go back to brain development and discuss some ideas for how conversation helps with brain development. From the earliest exchange of vocalizations with an infant to the sharing of confidences between a 4-year-old and his teacher, focusing on conversation is an excellent way to create a nurturing bond between child and caregiver that supports healthy development of the brain. Have an individual exchange with each child in your classroom every day. Be intentional about speaking with every child. Nurture the bond you have with each child by communicating on his or her level. Make a special effort to interact with each child in his or her home language. Work at helping every child be comfortable. Let children know that you are interested in what they are learning and feeling. Ask questions. Engage with them. So now it's your turn to consider ideas for utilizing conversation to enhance brain development. Stop the video here and complete the assignment, Conversation and Brain Development. Remember, this requires you to go deep. I've heard preschool teachers say their early literacy lessons take up so much of the day that they don't have time to address other subjects like math or science. This is a sign that their efforts to teach literacy may not be developmentally appropriate. Although the focus on early literacy has been fueled by research, none of the major studies recommend rote lessons. The path to successful reading seems to begin with children who are engaged in richer, more frequent, more varied, and more positive conversations in the early years. Conversation can be the vehicle to infuse literacy elements at any time. Some ideas for utilizing conversation to enhance early literacy are to address learning objectives through purposeful conversations throughout the day. Better learning happens through engaged conversation rather than instructional teaching. Notice foods that rhyme at lunch. An easy way to help with literacy and learning. This is where a teacher takes advantage of opportunities for built-in curriculum. Use complex vocabulary when discussing math concepts. Help children learn new words. Ask challenging questions that make children think about the hows and whys of a story. Don't ask for or expect yes or no answers. Remember, the point of conversation is that back and forth. So now it's your turn again to stop and do the next assignment, Conversation and Early Literacy, and come back to this video when you have finished. Addressing children's challenging behaviors involves getting more in tune with each individual child and modeling socially appropriate behavior with problem-solving techniques. Conversation is a recommended strategy for building positive relationships with children, especially those that may be vulnerable or present challenges. These techniques allow the teacher to use conversation to get to know the individual's strengths, needs, and personality style of the child. And rather than being the problem solver, support discussion between two children who are facing a conflict. Once again, stop here and do the next assignment. How can you use conversation to help address or prevent challenging behaviors? Performance-based assessments depend on the teacher's ability to engage children in appropriate interactions. These same strategies are linked to the highest ratings on classroom observations, such as the ECRS-R. To be successful, teachers need to hone their skills for in-depth, focused conversation with individual children. We're talking about interactive interactions. Use observation skills to engage children in structured screening instruments and gather data for performance-based assessments. We learn so much about children through conversation and through observing their conversation with others. For young bilingual children, instructionally embedded assessments using observational methods and samples of children's performance can provide a much fuller and more accurate picture of children's abilities than other methods. Here's another opportunity for you to stop the video and complete this next assignment. Consider how conversation can be used to help with child and classroom assessments. The National Individualizing Preschool Inclusion Project is helping teachers across the country learn to integrate therapies and special services in the regular classroom. Teachers, assistants, and therapists must have a shared vision of how to engage each child in learning and interacting. Techniques include learning basic American Sign Language to support conversation, using props or assistive devices to augment communication. Now it's time for you to pause the video again and think about additional ways in which you can use conversation to help with inclusion. Find that assignment and then you can continue the video. Corporate moguls are beginning to view early math and science learning as a critical business need. Preschool children don't need expensive science kits and math curricula. They will flourish in an environment where the adults take the time to capitalize on their interests and converse with them about the large and small things that are happening in the world around them. Count Legos during cleanup time. Simple, yet another example of built-in curriculum. Estimate how much applesauce will be needed to fill everyone's bowl at snack time. Discuss how the leaves look with their new colors. Wonder about how crayons and markers are alike and how are they different. Or have a chat about common items that float or sink. This is actually an easy one. So much of the conversation surrounding math and science can be serendipitous. It takes a teacher to take advantage of those built-in opportunities that come up. So now stop the video once again and add additional ideas for how you can use conversation to develop math and science learning. Conversation plays a key role in helping young children maintain their home language and gain skills in English. We must support the richness and depth of language in all languages of the classroom. Languages should be used for more than just classroom management. We can find opportunities to support languages throughout the curriculum and the environment. We should hear animated, interesting, passionate conversations in all of the languages of all of our children. Teachers who are not bilingual can use gestures and other graphic organizers to enhance interactions to bridge the language gap. And your last assignment for this portion is to stop here and consider ways in which you can use conversation with English language learners. We'll see you back here when you finish. I hope that the previous assignments really helped you go deep as you think about how integral conversation is. Of course, you use conversation every day, but this helps you to be intentional about it. Instead of separating the preschool days, into a myriad of component parts, we need to work on bringing it all together by integrating topics and multifaceted interactions. Consider that better results can be obtained by supporting rich, diverse, involved, engaged conversation in every part of the day with every child. Take a look at the ECRS-R and other program evaluation instruments, including NAEYC's accreditation criteria. The message is clear. High-quality classrooms foster deep, meaningful, conversational interactions with children. In reporting the findings of the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development study of early child care and youth development and the National Center for Early Development and Learning, the multi-state pre-K study, Robert Planta states that several aspects of teachers' interactive behaviors appear to uniquely predict gains in young children's achievement. Explicit instruction in certain key skills, sensitive and emotionally warm interactions, responsive feedback, verbal engagement and stimulation, and a classroom environment that is not overly structured or regimented. Good conversation cannot be taken for granted. Conversation is a skill that must be addressed in teacher training programs and supported by ongoing professional development. Conversation is indeed the tie that binds all of us together as people, and it is the common thread in our work with young children. Thanks for your participation in this topic.